David Okafor's hands trembled as the scene before him shattered his reality into pieces. Through the kitchen doorway of his Port Harcourt mansion, he watched his wife Monica standing over a kneeling figure in the backyard garden. It took 3 seconds for his brain to process what his eyes were seeing. The soaking wet, elderly woman with raised, trembling arms wasn't a stranger. It was his 75-year-old mother. His mother knelt on cold concrete, her nightgown drenched, and water dripping from her gray hair onto the pathway beneath her scraped knees. Monica gripped a thin cane, her face twisted with contempt as she circled the trembling woman like a predator. "You've destroyed my property." Monica's voice carried through the morning air. "You'll learn to respect what belongs to me." David's gift for his wife, a gold bracelet and a beautiful warm shawl for his mother he'd bought in Abuja, slipped from his frozen fingers. The 32-year-old real estate mogul who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd transformed struggling properties into luxury estates across River State, stood paralyzed. The woman he'd trusted with his mother's care was torturing the person who'd sacrificed everything for him. If you want to know how this billionaire responded to discovering his wife's darkest secret, keep watching until the end. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this. Drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from and what your local time is. Also, comment, "I promise to take care of my mom," or "I love you, Mom," to honor the elderly in your life. But to understand how this nightmare began, we need to go back 6 months. GRA Phase 2, Port Harcourt, represented everything David Okafor had dreamed of as a child. His magnificent mansion, with its towering gates and manicured gardens, stood as a monument to determination. From the wraparound balcony, you could see the neighboring estates of politicians, oil executives, and old money families. David belonged here now, but he'd never forgotten where he came from. "Mama, this is your home too," David had insisted 6 months earlier, helping his mother Grace up the marble staircase. At 75, she moved slowly, arthritis making each step deliberate. The doctors said you need monitoring. Your hypertension requires someone to ensure you take medications on time. Grace had resisted. The proud woman who'd worked as a cleaner, street vendor, and seamstress after her husband's death didn't want to burden her son. She remembered 10-year-old David crying at his father's funeral, and the promise she'd made that night. He would have a better life, no matter the cost. "David, I'll manage in my small flat. No arguments, Mama." His voice was gentle but firm. "Everything I have exists because you sacrificed for me. Now it's my turn." Monica had smiled beautifully that day, embracing Grace with apparent warmth. "Mama, you're so welcome here. I'll take good care of you." David's wife was 28, stunningly beautiful, from a comfortable middle-class background. They'd married 3 years ago after a whirlwind romance. She'd been swept off her feet by his success, his generosity, his ambition. He believed she loved him. He believed she'd care for his mother. He was catastrophically wrong. Monica's transformation began subtly. Her friends, wealthy Lego socialites who lunched at expensive restaurants, filled her head with horror stories during their weekly video calls. "Your mother-in-law will ruin your marriage, Monica. They always do. She'll poison David against you, make him think you're not good enough. These old women steal family resources, control everything. You need to establish dominance early, or she'll walk all over you." Monica absorbed these toxic narratives like poison. She noticed Grace's presence at dinner tables, the way David laughed at his mother's old stories, how he consulted her opinion on business decisions. Jealousy took root where love should have grown. The first incident happened 3 weeks after Grace moved in. David traveled to Lagos for a property inspection. Monica served dinner, jollof rice with chicken for herself, cold leftover beans for Grace. "Is the food not to your taste, Mama?" Monica asked sweetly when Grace hesitated. "No, my daughter. Thank you." Grace ate the cold beans without complaint. When Mrs. Blessing, The housekeeper, who came 3 times weekly, was present. Monica's performance was Academy Award-worthy. She'd fuss over Grace's medications, adjust her pillows, prepare special tea. The moment Mrs. Blessing left on errands, the mask dropped. "Stop shuffling around like that," Monica would snap when Grace moved slowly through the house. "You're not dying, you're just old." She ridiculed Grace's morning prayers. She forbade the elderly woman from sitting in the living room when she wanted to watch television. She criticized every action, every word, every movement. Grace endured silently. She'd survived poverty, widowhood, and years of backbreaking work. She could survive this too. Besides, David was so happy. His business was thriving. He came home each evening with stories of new deals, expansion plans, dreams fulfilled. How could she destroy his joy by revealing his wife's cruelty? There was another factor Grace noticed. After 3 years of marriage, Monica wasn't pregnant. She'd overheard Monica crying to her friends on the phone, heard the doctor's appointments mentioned, sensed the tension this created. Perhaps Monica blamed her presence, saw her as another reminder of failure. Grace prayed for patience. She prayed for Monica's heart to soften. She never imagined how much worse things would become. When David announced his business trip to Abuja, an important meeting with federal government officials about a massive housing project, Monica's eyes gleamed with opportunity. "How long will you be gone?" "4 days, maybe 5. The negotiations are complex." David kissed her forehead. "Take good care of Mama. Make sure she takes her medications on time." "Of course, darling. Don't worry about anything." The morning after David's departure, Monica's transformation was complete. Grace accidentally dropped a glass while fetching water, her arthritic hands losing grip. The glass shattered across the kitchen floor. "You clumsy, useless old woman!" Monica's scream echoed through the house. "Look what you've done." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." "Clean it up." "With your bare hands." Grace knelt carefully, her joints protesting, picking up glass shards. Small cuts appeared on her fingers. Blood mixed with water on the floor. Monica watched with cold satisfaction. Each day brought new cruelty. Monica served Grace tiny portions of food while eating lavishly herself. She turned the air conditioning to maximum in Grace's room, knowing the cold aggravated her arthritis. She hid the television remote so Grace couldn't watch her favorite Christian programs. "This is my house now," Monica announced Wednesday morning. "You're here on my mercy. Remember that." Grace's blood pressure spiked. She felt dizzy, weak, but didn't dare complain. She counted hours until David's return, praying for strength to endure. Thursday morning brought the breaking point. Grace, trying to be helpful, gathered laundry for washing. Among the clothes was Monica's expensive designer scarf, a gift from her mother, bright orange with intricate patterns. Grace didn't realize it required hand-washing and special care. She put it in the washing machine with other items. When Monica discovered the faded scarf, her rage exploded beyond control. At 8:30 a.m. Thursday, Monica dragged Grace by her arm to the backyard garden. The elderly woman stumbled, nearly falling, but Monica showed no mercy. "You destroyed something valuable." Monica's voice was venomous. "Now you'll pay." She fetched a bucket of cold water from the outdoor tap and hurled it over Grace's head. The water drenched the elderly woman's nightgown, plastered her gray hair to her skull, soaked through to her skin. Grace gasped, shock making her dizzy. She hadn't taken her morning hypertension medication yet. "Kneel," Monica commanded. "Right there, on the concrete." Grace lowered herself painfully to her knees on the rough pathway. The concrete scraped her skin immediately. She felt warm blood trickle down her shins. "Hands up! Above your head!" Grace raised her arms. Within seconds, the arthritis pain was excruciating. Her shoulders burned. Her elbows trembled. Water dripped from her hair down her raised arms, into her face, mixing with tears she couldn't stop. Monica retrieved a thin cane from the garden shed, the one used for supporting climbing plants. She slapped it against her palm, the sound sharp and threatening. "You'll stay exactly like this until I'm satisfied you've learned your lesson about respecting my property." Monica circled the kneeling woman like a predator. "And if you even think about telling David, I'll make your life infinitely worse. I'll convince him you're losing your mind, that you need to go to a home for the aged. You'll spend your final years alone, abandoned, forgotten." Grace wept silently. Cold water ran down her trembling body. Pain radiated from her knees, her shoulders, her arthritic joints. Her raised arms felt like they were being pulled from their sockets. She prayed, not for rescue, because she'd given up hoping for that, but simply for the strength to endure. She never imagined rescue was 15 minutes away. David's Wednesday evening had gone unexpectedly well. The Abuja negotiations concluded earlier than anticipated, with government officials agreeing to his proposals for affordable housing estates. By 8 p.m., he was at the airport, catching a late flight back to Port Harcourt. He could have stayed in Abuja, celebrated with colleagues, enjoyed the success. Instead, he thought about his mother, about Monica, about home. Something, call it intuition, call it divine intervention, pulled him back. His flight landed at 11 p.m. It was already late, and he knew by the time he drove home it would be well past midnight. Not wanting to disturb Monica and Grace at such an hour, David decided to check into a guest house near the airport and leave very early in the morning. Thursday morning, he woke at 5:30 a.m., energized and happy. Before leaving the airport the night before, he'd stopped at the gift shop, purchasing a gold bracelet for Monica and a beautiful warm shawl for his mother, soft cashmere in deep purple, her favorite color. Now he drove through the quiet dawn streets of Port Harcourt, eager to surprise them with breakfast, maybe make his mother's favorite, yam and egg sauce, the meal she used to make when money was scarce but love was abundant. He entered through the front door quietly at 8:45 a.m., gifts in hand, expecting to find his wife and mother still sleeping. The house was unnaturally quiet. No sounds from the kitchen. No movement upstairs. Then he heard it, a soft, broken crying from somewhere outside. Confused, David moved through the house toward the sound. It came from the backyard. Through the kitchen, past the breakfast nook, to the door leading to the garden. He stopped dead. The scene before him shattered his reality into pieces. His mother, the woman who'd worked until her hands bled to pay his school fees, who'd sold her only gold jewelry for his university textbooks, who'd gone hungry so he could eat, knelt on cold concrete like a criminal. Her nightgown was soaked, water pooling around her knees. Her arms were raised above her head, trembling violently. Blood stained the concrete beneath her knees. Monica stood over her with a cane, her face twisted with contempt, words of abuse pouring from her mouth. "Think you can ruin my things without consequences? You're here because David pities you, nothing more." The gifts fell from David's hands. The gold bracelet clattered across the floor. The purple shawl drifted like a falling dream. The sound made Monica spin around. Her expression transformed in rapid sequence. Shock, fear, calculation, desperate performance. "David! She. It's not what it looks like. She ruined my designer scarf. I was just—" David's voice emerged dangerously quiet, each word carved from ice. "Get away from my mother." Monica stammered, her excuses tumbling out in panic. "She destroyed expensive property. I was just teaching her to be more careful. I said get away." His roar shook the garden walls, sent birds scattering from nearby trees. He rushed past Monica, dropping to his knees beside Grace. Gently, carefully, he lowered her trembling arms, supporting her weight as she collapsed against him. Her knees were bleeding. Her entire body shook uncontrollably. Her lips had turned blue from cold. David removed his jacket with shaking hands, wrapping it around her soaking shoulders. His own eyes filled with tears as he lifted her face to his. The woman who'd been his entire world growing up, his protector, his inspiration, had been reduced to this broken, bleeding, terrified state. In his own home. By his own wife. "Mama," he whispered, his voice cracking. "How long? How long has this been happening?" Grace wouldn't answer. Even now, broken and bleeding, she tried to protect him. Her silence spoke volumes. David lifted his mother carefully, mindful of her injuries, her age, her fragility. He carried her inside like she once carried him as a child, whispering apologies and promises. He settled her in the master bedroom, surrounding her with blankets, adjusting the temperature, calling his personal physician with urgent instructions. Dr. Adeyemi arrived within 20 minutes. While he examined Grace, treating her cuts, checking her blood pressure, dangerously elevated, and administering medications, David stood by the window, his entire body vibrating with rage. Monica had followed them inside, alternating between excuses and tears, her performance shifting based on his reactions. When Dr. Adeyemi finished and promised to return that evening, David finally turned to face his wife. "Pack your things." His voice was arctic. "You have 2 hours. David, please. I'm your wife. You can't throw me out for disciplining." Disciplining. The word emerged like poison. My 75-year-old mother with hypertension? The woman who worked herself to exhaustion raising me alone? You call torture discipline? Monica's strategy shifted immediately. She dropped to her knees, tears flowing, hands clasped in supplication. "I'm sorry. I'll change, I promise. My friends told me mothers-in-law ruin marriages. I was just trying to protect our relationship by abusing an elderly woman." David's disgust was palpable. By making her suffer in her own son's house? What relationship, Monica? I don't even know who you are. I don't think I ever did. But we're married. 3 years together. You can't just watch me. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling your parents. They should know what their daughter has become." Monica's tears dried instantly, replaced by calculation. "You have no proof. It's my word against hers. Who will people believe, a young wife or a senile old woman?" David smiled without warmth. "You really think I built my business empire without learning to gather evidence? Mrs. Blessing will be here in 1 hour. Let's see what she has to say about your discipline." The color drained from Monica's face. Over the next 7 days, David did something that shocked everyone who knew him. He didn't simply divorce Monica and move on. Instead, he orchestrated something far more strategic, far more impactful. First, he called Mrs. Blessing to the house when Monica wasn't present. The housekeeper broke down immediately, guilt and relief warring on her face. "Sir, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I witnessed it, the insults, the cold food, the cruelty. But I was afraid. I have 4 children. I need this job. She threatened to fire me if I said anything." David recorded everything. Dates, incidents, specific details. Mrs. Blessing provided a litany of abuses. Monica serving Grace spoiled food, hiding her medications to make her feel worse, mocking her prayers, forcing her to clean with bare hands, verbal abuse that escalated daily. Second, David visited Monica's parents in their comfortable home in Port Harcourt's Diobu area. Mr. and Mrs. Chukwu were respectable people, her father a retired civil servant, her mother a primary school teacher. They welcomed David warmly, expecting a social visit. Instead, he showed them photographs on his phone. Grace's bleeding knees. Her cuts from the broken glass. Medical reports detailing dangerous blood pressure spikes. Mrs. Blessing's written testimony with specific incidents and dates. Monica's mother wept. Her father aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Our daughter did this," Mrs. Chukwu whispered. "We raised her better than this." "She did worse," David replied quietly. "For months. While I trusted her with my mother's care." Third, and this was what shocked everyone, David didn't immediately file for divorce. Instead, he announced the creation of Grace's Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to protecting elderly people from abuse, especially from family members in affluent homes. He held a press conference at his corporate headquarters. Journalists, community leaders, and social advocates packed the room. David stood at the podium with his mother beside him in a wheelchair, her injuries visible, her dignity intact. "We assume elder abuse only happens in poor families, in situations of desperation," David began. "But it happens in wealthy homes too, behind gates and guards, where the elderly suffer silently rather than burden their successful children. My mother endured months of torture in my own home, and I was blind to it." He made Monica's case public without using her name, describing the abuse in stark detail. The story went viral within hours. Social media exploded. News outlets picked it up. Churches discussed it. The wealthy elite of Port Harcourt whispered about who the unnamed wife might be. Monica, facing social disgrace and potential legal consequences, panicked. David's lawyers presented her with a choice: participate in 12 months of intensive community service at elder care facilities, attend mandatory counseling sessions, and publicly apologize for her actions, or face David pressing charges for assault and abuse of a vulnerable person under Nigerian law. The legal case was solid. Photographs, medical reports, eyewitness testimony documented pattern of abuse. She could face years in prison. Monica chose community service. For the next 12 months, Monica's life transformed completely. Every morning at 6 a.m., she reported to one of 3 elder care facilities David had selected, facilities caring for abandoned, abused, or impoverished elderly people. She fed residents who could no longer feed themselves. She cleaned bedpans and changed soiled sheets. She bathed elderly bodies ravaged by age and neglect. She listened to their stories, tales of children who abandoned them, families who stole their pensions, spouses who abused them. At first, Monica performed the work mechanically, resentfully, counting days until freedom. Her designer clothes stayed in the closet, replaced by simple work uniforms. Her manicured hands developed calluses. Her social media went silent. Her friends, the wealthy socialites who'd filled her head with poisonous ideas, distanced themselves when the truth emerged. They deleted her numbers, unfollowed her accounts, erased her from their lives with the same cold efficiency she'd used on Grace. Monica attended mandatory therapy sessions twice weekly with Dr. Ned, a psychologist specializing in empathy disorders and entitled behavior. The sessions were brutal. "You didn't see Grace as human," Dr. Ned stated bluntly during their third session. "You saw her as an obstacle to your comfort, a rival for David's attention. You need to understand why you stripped an elderly woman of her humanity." The breakthrough came 4 months into her service. Monica was feeding Mrs. Okonkwo, a 90-year-old woman abandoned by her children after she developed dementia. As Monica spooned soup carefully into the elderly woman's mouth, Mrs. Okonkwo suddenly grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "Ngozi," the old woman whispered, confusion clouding her eyes. "Ngozi, is that you? Did you finally come back?" "No, Ma," Monica replied gently. "I'm not Ngozi. My daughter, she hasn't visited in 3 years. Said I was too much trouble." Tears rolled down weathered cheeks. "I sold my land to pay her school fees. Everything I had. Where is she now?" Something broke inside Monica at that moment. She saw Grace in Mrs. Okonkwo's eyes, the same sacrifice, the same abandonment, the same undeserved suffering. She saw herself in the absent Ngozi, the ingratitude, the cruelty, the monstrous selfishness. Monica wept as she fed Mrs. Okonkwo, the elderly woman patting her hand comfortingly, somehow offering grace despite her own pain. From that day forward, Monica's service became genuine. She learned that Grace had sold her only gold jewelry to buy David's university textbooks. She discovered Grace had worked 3 jobs simultaneously to afford his school fees. She met dozens of elderly people with similar stories, parents who sacrificed everything only to face cruelty, neglect, or abandonment from their children. She began to understand the magnitude of what she'd destroyed. After 11 months of service, Monica requested a meeting with Grace through David's lawyers. She didn't demand it, didn't claim entitlement. She requested it humbly, prepared for rejection. Grace, her health stabilized and her spirit recovering in the renovated wing of David's mansion, agreed to see her. They met in the mansion's garden, the same location where Monica had tortured her, now transformed into a peaceful space with comfortable seating, accessible pathways, and Grace's favorite flowers blooming in abundance. Monica arrived carrying nothing but her remorse. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, her former glamour stripped away by months of genuine service. She approached slowly, giving Grace every opportunity to refuse her presence. Grace sat in a comfortable chair, Joy, David's new girlfriend and a social worker he'd met through the foundation, standing protectively beside her. David had chosen not to attend. His anger toward Monica still burned too hot, and he knew his presence would only complicate what needed to be a moment between the two women. Joy had agreed to be there as both support and witness, respecting Grace's wishes to hear what Monica had to say. Monica stopped a respectful distance away, then did something she'd once forced Grace to do. She knelt. But this kneeling was different. Not forced, not punishment, not cruelty. It was respect, supplication, genuine remorse. "Mama," Monica's voice broke immediately. "I cannot undo what I did to you. I tortured you because of foolish stories my friends told me and because of my own arrogance. I saw you as competition for David's love, as an inconvenience in my comfortable life. I treated you worse than I would treat a stranger." Tears flowed freely down her face. "I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But you deserve to hear that what I did was evil. Not just wrong, not just cruel, it was evil. And I am deeply, truly, genuinely sorry." She looked up at Grace's face, making no excuses, offering no justifications. "I've worked with elderly people for 11 months. I've heard their stories. I know what you sacrificed for David. You sold everything you had, worked until your body broke, went hungry so your son could eat. And I repaid your lifetime of sacrifice with torture in your old age. There are no words sufficient to express my shame." The garden was silent except for Monica's sobs and birdsong in the trees. Grace studied the young woman kneeling before her. She saw genuine transformation, not the performance Monica had once perfected, but real change written in exhaustion, humility, and hard-earned wisdom. Finally, Grace reached forward and touched Monica's head gently, the same gesture of blessing Nigerian mothers give their children. "I forgive you, my daughter." Grace's voice was steady and strong. "God commands us to forgive those who wrong us, and I choose obedience over bitterness. I forgive you." Monica wept harder, relief and gratitude overwhelming her. But Grace wasn't finished. However, forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Forgiveness heals my heart. It doesn't restore what was broken between you and David. That marriage died the day you chose cruelty over compassion. David divorced Monica quietly after her service period ended. She didn't contest it, didn't hire expensive lawyers, didn't fight for his wealth. She signed the papers and walked away with only what she'd brought into the marriage. But Monica's transformation continued beyond her mandatory service. She continued volunteering at elder care facilities, finding genuine purpose in the work. She became an advocate against elder abuse, speaking at churches, community centers, and women's groups about her own failures. "I was that woman," she'd tell audiences, her shame visible but her message powerful. "I was the daughter-in-law who tortured an elderly mother. I believed lies about mothers-in-law ruining marriages, and I became the very monster I claimed to fear. Her testimony helped other families recognize and address abuse before it escalated. She helped establish abuse hotlines and support groups. She dedicated her life to redemption through service. David found love again. Joy, the social worker he'd met while establishing Grace's foundation, shared his values and his heart. More importantly, she adored Grace, treating the elderly woman with genuine respect and affection. Their courtship was slow, careful, built on trust and shared purpose. 2 years after Monica's departure, David and Joy married in a simple ceremony. Grace was matron of honor, radiant in purple, her favorite color, standing strong despite her age. She'd lived to see her son find genuine love and, eventually, to hold her grandchildren. Grace's foundation flourished, expanding to facilities across Rivers State and eventually throughout Nigeria. It provided legal advocacy for abused elderly people, training programs for caregivers, and public awareness campaigns. The foundation saved hundreds of elderly people from situations similar to what Grace had endured. Grace herself became the foundation's public face, sharing her story to give hope to other elderly people suffering in silence. Her courage inspired legislation protecting vulnerable elderly people from family abuse. If this story touched you, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories, and comment below what you've learned from this story. Also, remember to comment, "I will always honor my parents," or "Mom, I love you," to show respect for the elderly in your life. Your comment might inspire someone else to treat their parents better. And remember, respect for our elders isn't just tradition, it's humanity. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next story.